But most of you don't even vaguely understand what it is because you don't employ it in your own life, your own existence. I'm going to tell you why this is so difficult. Media influence on aggression. So this is a study, one of the primary studies that go back about 23 years ago now, in 2001, where they looked at if we project violence and aggression to a viewer, will it make them violent and aggressive? And the answer is absolutely no question. And so do you think that possibly those that are in the position of power may do this? I know as a little boy, I was encouraged to play war games. I know that the draft was active when I was a young man. I know they equated masculinity and machivoism to being tough. Now, that wasn't an inherent process, although testosterone can fuel that. It was a trained sociological process that was happening. The analysis conclude that exposure to violent media significantly increased likelihood of aggression behavior in short-term, aggressive thoughts and emotions, in long-term, suggesting a strong influence of media content on behavior. I just start to think as we go through this, what would happen if we did the opposite? What would happen if we taught love? We taught community, we taught unity. Well, think about it. Why can't we? Oh, well, that's far out. Not going to happen. But as long as you're in the camp of far out, it's not going to happen. Guess what? It won't happen. Health communication and behavior change. This very interesting point. When I was a young man, everyone wanted to smoke. It was rare young people did not smoke because the cigarette industries did a brilliant job on convincing us that we grew up and became more attractive when we smoked. Now, can you imagine the disconnect on that one? That we thought we were sexier with a cigarette in our mouth and smelled horribly bad. We thought we were attractive to the other sex from that. Well, nobody said humans are smart except humans. Well, what they decided, it wasn't really a good thing, probably because it was costing governments around the world billions and billions and billions of dollars, if not trillions, on uninsured people dying and suffering and going to hospitals and doctors from smoking. So they put their head and money behind this, and they pretty much made it so it wasn't attractive anymore. It wasn't sexy. People started to realize this is an oddity that generation after generation we smoked. And the fact is, those campaigns worked, and we have proof that they've worked. Can you imagine if we take the kind of mindset and experts in this type of marketing and use it to make a healthier human race? Why can't we do it? Because you say it can't be done. Neurological response to food advertising. Now, how many times, and I'm just going to have you think for a minute, have you filled up your little belly and you're now sitting and watching a video or going to the movie theater, and before you know it, they're advertising foods. Now, you're not hungry. You know you're not hungry. You're satiated. The brain says you're filled. But the next thing you know, you're sitting in front of the refrigerator or at the counter at the movie theater buying things that you don't need. Now, this is how they market junk food to you. This is how they market food that makes you sick. This is how obesity levels are shockingly high today. Overweight, shockingly high. The number one contributor to all disease is excessive weight. Now, think about what I've just said to you. And this is a program that they've been using for generations now. In our book, we actually write about studies where they put sounds in. They call them trigger sounds. Opening up a particular product. Opening up a particular can. I've actually seen advertising for soda companies where the can opens. and immediately triggers something in your mind from the addictive substances that are in there, the sugars, the synthetic opiates that they put in. Read the work of Dr. David Kessler on synthetic opiates. They put in all the commercial foods that now, before you know it, you're drinking not 1 can or 2 cans, 3 or 4 cans or 6 packs of these disease-causing, age-altering, premature age-creating substances. They're not food, so we can't put them in the food category. So they found that viewing advertising for high caloric foods activates brain regions associated with the reward and hunger, suggesting the biological basis for the increased consumption of unhealthy food after viewing such ads. You don't think they know that? I'm teaching this to you. They're the people who created this. Now we get to social media. So not long ago, there was TV ads, advertising on the side of buses or in subways. Now there are social media ads. And this goes back to what I said early on. We had a handful of people marketing to us in 1990. Now, nearly 25 years later, we have 3,000, and it's not going to stop at that, marketing to us daily, mostly through social media. Studies have also investigated the impact of social media on perception and behavior. For instance, research from Kramer, Guillory, and Hannock back in 2014 found that emotional states could be transferred to others via emotionally leading people to experience the same emotions within their awareness. Now, I know this to be factual because way back in the early 2000s, I was part of an organization called the International Spa Association. And we had a speaker come in from the top marketing group in the world that was just then moving into social media in a big way, probably the leaders in the entire world. And they gave a 2-hour dissertation on how this works. And what they used as an example, it was brilliant, is the cotton industry's ads. And they actually showed 2 of the cotton industry ads that said not one word. It was just people enjoying cotton. Didn't say buy cotton, use cotton, cotton's healthy, cotton's good, cotton's more sustainable. Not a word was said. And everyone, I looked around, thousands of people sitting there in the auditorium, and that big projection on the screen made us all feel good. Now, can you imagine if we could do that with healthy lifestyles? Why aren't we doing it with healthy lifestyles? Why aren't we projecting affirmative images, positive messages? Because it's easier to have sick people follow rules than it is strong, affirmative, clear, and proactive people. The way to keep people down is keep them sick, keep them weak, keep them confused, keep them unfed, keep them malnourished, desperate. Constantly desperation leads you to be the flock. And there's a big flock out there today. The essence of human power, awakening to our empathy, consciousness, and forgiveness unlocks our true potential. That says a lot. The things that I learned as a boy that spirituality taught so beautifully were those very things I mentioned to you. And ironically, in my work now, since 1970, I've actually seen these 3 extraordinary feelings, thoughts, emotions be the way that people heal themselves and prevent disease and aging. So what we knew thousands and thousands of years ago, probably instinctually, our great teachers, our great leaders who were at that point in power of helping, not in power of manipulating and controlling, basically said, have empathy for others. Be conscious of yourself and other people. And most important, forgive yourself and forgive others. Don't hold grudges and wedges and separation and they and us. Because let me tell you, when they make lots of little small groups, they don't have a powerful humanity. that says, no, we won't go along with the program. It is through unity, kindness, and grace that we forge a path towards a liberated future, leaving behind the constraints of old humanity. So I propose to you and everyone listening all over the world today, we are now living in old humanity, and in the next 5 years, we have an opportunity to springboard into new humanity, the humanity of unity and empathy, compassion, and forgiveness. A humanity that basically says, this is what we require, the basic things we require as human beings, and not be compromising on it. As I said, commitment to yourself with passion, you don't compromise. Because there are things that are unconscionable, we should not tolerate and do not have to tolerate, but one voice is not going to do it. Billions of voices will. So rapidly, we're going to go through 10 questions for self-assessment to achieve great personal freedom. What are you putting in your mouth? Is it alive? Is it filled with disease-causing pesticides and chemicals? Is it making you conscious or deterring from your consciousness? Most people out there in the developed world today don't even think of food as anything other than a recreational activity. Mindful eating. What am I eating? How am I eating? Where am I eating? Am I taking time to think about, visualize that every time I chew, hopefully this organic plant-based food is going to nourish every one of my cells, it make my bones, my organs, and it's going to make my brain and my heart function the way it should, so that I can have empathy, compassion, consciousness, awareness, etc. Environmental awareness. Are you drinking out of a socket, a spigot today? Are you drinking pure water? Every drop of water on the planet is contaminated with plastics and pharmaceutical drugs, and then the other things that you know about. Heavy metals, chemicals, herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, creating diseases such as Parkinson's and many others. Be aware of what you're consuming. Yes, we don't want to use plastic unless it's necessary, but the reality is this is a very important aspect because most of your body is water, 80% of your brain is water. So it can't have particles that are destructive floating around in them. Thought patterns. Look at your thought patterns. I sit and teach this every single day, and I still find myself with negative thought patterns quite often. It takes a life to create negative, and seemingly it takes almost a life to reverse the negative thought patterns, because the whole atmosphere is negative today. Blue. Negative cells. That's unfortunate. Positive doesn't. Never forget, a few years ago, 25 or so, we had a couple come in here very successful on the stock market back in the 90s. And they said, we're going to do something great. We're going to get a very well-known and respected anchor from news, and we're going to create a 30-minute positive news channel, and I'm sure this is going to sell to one of the networks. Well, they came back a couple of years later and they said how disappointed we were. We put all this effort and all this money and nobody wanted to listen to positive news. You should want to listen to positive news. You've got to detach yourself from the negative to make room for the positive. Look at what you're thinking and alter those things. Media consumption. Study just came out recently. It was stunning to me that 67% of you that are using cell phones are addicted to it. And what does that mean? Not unlike alcohol. When a person, by the way, cannot stop drinking alcohol, most of you, 67%, cannot stop using your phone. You will not allow your personal life to supersede that. That you'd rather go and talk to somebody on your phone than be with your friends and your family and take quiet time, private time. Think about that disruption in your life. Needless to say, we teach people here about the biological problems with sticking a computer at your brain and what it does to the thyroid and endocrine system, but that isn't as important as how it detaches you from community. Interactions with others. It's sad we have to talk about this today. Again, back during the agrarian and before that, we were all tribal. We had to be with others. We wanted to be with others. We were codependent in a positive way on others, interrelated with others. Today, for the first time in history, and the younger you are, the more this applies, we are more estranged from others than ever, 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 ever. And we also know from research today, finally the longevity community grew up. And forever, for several generations, we've said, oh yes, people that live to centenarian time, 100 years and beyond, are eating plant-based diets and exercising. Now they added a third that's not a caveat, but a pillar, and that's community. How do my interactions with others reflect my own state of being? When you're not with others, you can't even relate to who you are. And what can they teach me about myself? Important things. Personal environment. How many of you know your clothes are the most important personal environment? Many of you sitting there listening to the real truth about health now are giving yourself disease-causing, cancer-causing chemicals through using man-made fibers. And it's really hard not to use man-made fibers because all of the clothing, and certainly the least expensive and even the most expensive clothing today, are made out of polyester, nylons, etc. Be aware. Is my immediate environment, home, work, supportive of my health and happiness? And what changes can I make to improve it? Are you living in a synthetic environment, synthetic clothing, etc.? Do you think that detaches you from nature? Do you think it possibly makes you ill? Well, I know it does. Digital detox. So it's not only the cell phone you're carrying around and addicted to, but many of your jobs require that all day and all night in some cases, you're actually in front of a computer. The average Western child today is in front of a screen from 6.5 to 7.5 hours. I'm really happy to see a very minor trend, but a trend where some restaurants will not allow you to come in. Your phone is put at the basket. Do this in your home. Unless you are a doctor, an emergency professional, you don't have to have that constant communication with the outside. Have private time. Why you don't want private time is you don't know who you are, you're frightened of yourself, and it's scary to think of what you are and who you are. Once you spend time on yourself, you'll want time away from this technology. Thought consumption. What are you taking in? We talked about this not long ago. How negative images, violence, etc. Keep that permanently embedded in your mind and head, immediate and long term. But how about the inverse to that? How about if, in fact, I spent time on positive thought? One of the great teachers, actually the first motivational teacher in the 20th century, was a guy called Norman Vincent Peale. Norman Vincent Peale said it beautifully. He said, no, we may not be the great writers, the great musicians, the great thinkers, but read them, listen to them, and be with them, and they'll influence you in a positive way. My strong advice to you on that. Hang out with negative, you're going to be negative. Hang out with positive, you're going to be positive. What type of thoughts do I allow into my mind regularly? And how can I cultivate more positive and empowering mental environment? Big question. You don't think this is something you should consider? I'm going to tell you, people, these are the things we work with here when we're helping people reverse major diseases. Active engagement. Don't sit around and say, oh, let's watch sports games as you drink beer and eat chips. Do something. Maybe you're not an athlete, maybe you're not into sports, but get out into nature. Get involved. Swim, dance, sing, walk, go to the gym, play games. These are the things that your ancestors didn't think about a second time. This was part of who they were and why they were. And remember, through evolution, that's the way our body evolved. And it's only been a handful of time that we are not engaged. And because of that, we're suffering. It's not just about food, people. As important, if not even more important in some cases, movement, engagement, activity is powerful, a powerful agent. I was just talking today in class to our guest here. We have people here now from 9 countries around the world, about a little study I did nearly 20 years ago, where when we had them do moderate aerobic exercise, 35 minutes, 5 days a week, that people were recovering from the 3 major diseases, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer, 3 times faster. 3 major diseases, 3 times faster, just by moving and circulating the blood, which brings immune system cells, stem cells to bring about the recovery. It's just part of the story. It's not an addendum to the story. It's equal to food. So I want you to listen to some people. They may hopefully wake you up. What I've learned in my life is just like Norman Vincent Peale suggested to us, really smart people, the top people in their field, at the highest level, watch what they're doing, because they're what we call not the trendsetters, but the pioneers. And these pioneers may teach you something. So listen very closely now.
Well, you were vegetarian at 9, you became vegetarian, and then more recently vegan. What made you take that vegan step? Was there one fact you read? Was there one thing you saw?
I think it was definitely the mucus in milk.
Yes.
That was something that was so disturbing, that the cows that are dairy cows are that sick.
Yeah.
And also that then we're drinking or consuming, whether it's cheese or, yogurt or ice cream or whatever, dairy product you're eating, that you're actually eating mucus, was so disgusting to me, that there's like pus in all dairy, is so disturbing that was not difficult to change after.
So Dr. Igor reached out to people that we have some friends in common, and they reached out to my parents. And when I met him, I did a couple of sessions, and I felt really a big difference. That was the first time that I got introduced to the quantum physics, to the quantum field world, to the biofeedback. He had all this analysis and overview of my emotional body, of my mental body, of my physical body, on all the food allergies and everything that I was experiencing. And so we started slowly taking off layer by layer and really going deep into things that are related to my health and trying to understand what is the core of it. So, of course, diet was one of the most integral part of the problem, and changing the diet was something that allowed me to get rid of the allergies and everything, particularly gluten and dairy that I removed from my diet, and refined sugar. And so it was a change, but I was very determined, because I could feel instantly, right after the first session, second session with him, I could sense that there is an improvement. That was the initial point of the journey that got me to the point where I am at the moment, where I'm eating plant-based, where I'm not eating any animal products. So it's a really interesting journey that started when you mentioned in 2010.
I've been vegan since I was 3 years old, and at that age, me and my siblings witnessed fish being killed in a really violent and aggressive way. And it was just absolutely obvious that that was something that we didn't want to participate in and we didn't want to support. To me, it seems obvious. I don't want to cause pain to another living, empathetic creature.
So one of the most well-known and respected actresses, the top tennis player, from what I've been told, in history. So you saw one of the most respected actors in history. The One started at 9 years old on plant-based. That's what consciousness, empathy, compassion does. One started at 3 years old. The top tennis player in the world started to look beyond what doctors were telling him, even holistic doctors, and going into what he called the quantum world. In fact, this year, I have a book coming out this month called How to Live to 120, this month. And in November, a landmark book called Quantum Human that expounds and expands very much on what we're talking about today. How to live in the future world, not the old world that we come from now. Some other people that share this with us, tops in their field, renowned, respected comedians do this, renowned and respected actors and actresses. This young lady was here with her sister. Both are doing this 100%. And they are out playing with people half their age and winning today. One of the great musical writers in the history of music, all history of music. This little wonderful woman who was a girl when she started, who had more courage than all of the leaders on the planet Earth, and basically is saying something that's so important and so profoundly critical for the future of the human race. Famous musicians, even race car drivers. You wouldn't think that today. They realize that why they win is they're eating plant-based diets. Many of these people are on living food diets, not just plant-based. I know you're going to hear a lot about plant-based, and I really honor and respect the doctors who work their way up to that level. But we're well beyond that today. Quantum world requires frequency in the food, not just eating food frequently. So this is an alumni of Hippocrates, and we're going to end this before questions and answers. Listening to what I call one of the great thinkers alive today. I've recently just seen two of his more recent films. One, he was Freud in it. Another great man in Czechoslovakia saving the lives of nearly 700 children about ready to be taken over by the Nazis. Listen astutely, listen closely to what he says, because it really represents, in a nutshell, what I was articulating today.
We don't know what reality is. We don't know what life is. We don't know what time is. We could be dreaming in this at this moment. We don't know.
The self is a kind of fiction.
None of it makes any logical left-brain sense to me. There have been books written about it, Jung wrote about it, that there's something in us that we deeply understand. That's how asleep the human race is. So our whole history has been one of a slumber.
All that we see or seem is but a dream within a dream.
It's a dream within a dream, to quote Edgar Allan Poe. They are not long the days of wine and roses.
Out of a misty dream, a path emerges for a while.
And closes within a dream.
Well, thanks for listening. If you want to scan there, you can learn more about what we've been doing here for 70 years and continue to do at the spearhead of this movement. We not only originated the holistic health movement, but we keep expanding it and moving it into realms well beyond the conventional ones that have been set up today in the so-called wellness business. So thanks for listening.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Brian, for that very informative presentation. So we're going to begin the Q&A session. So but before we do, this QR code, does this tell everything about how to get in contact with you, or?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Absolutely. And
All
then,
right.
of course, you just get on the internet and Hippocrates Wellness is there. And we have combined with Anna Marie and I nearly 40 books. 2 I just mentioned are coming out, 1 next week and 1 in November.
Great. And then as far as your books, you can go to therealtruthabout.health.com and go to our bookstore, and you can find Brian's books at the website and purchase them there.
That's it.
Okay. So if you're interested in asking any questions, you can go ahead and raise your hand in Zoom, and we'll put something up instructing you exactly how to do that. So, all right. So most of my questions are going to be not necessarily on the breadth of the topic today, but I do have a few of them. So you mentioned digital detoxing. What's the best way to digital detox?
Well, you make a schedule because our work, our family, our habits today have brought us very much into constant communication with computers and technology. So let's say that you go home at 6 o'clock at night and you're not a doctor, an emergency person who basically you're required to pick up the phone. The vast majority are not. You say, this is it. You put it in a basket. Many, many families I know have a basket at the front door. Some leave their shoes and some leave the phone, but don't bring it into your house. Now, you can always go if there's some absolute need, but don't let this disrupt your life. This is not healthy. This is psychologically and biologically not healthy for you. I could go on a rampage for hours and talk about the science we have on how it creates neurological problems in cancer, including brain cancer. But let's leave that for another time and just say it disrupts your existence. And we don't need any more of that disruption. You have plenty of it right now.
Great, thank you. And you mentioned clothing being one of the most toxic things that we encounter in our environment. What kind of fabrics would you suggest people avoid? What kind of fabrics would you suggest people gravitate to? And are there any brands, not that we're promoting any brands here, but are there any brands that you've personally found that we could check out as viable options for us?
Well, let's start by saying that most clothing out there in the marketplace today is made out of oil, the same oil that you put into your automobiles and use for equipment and machinery. So they weave it into polyester, nylon, and other synthetic fabrics. 25% of all the pesticides in the world are used on growing non-organic cotton. So it's not just natural fibers. Remember, 25%, 1/4 of all the pesticides are used for cotton growth. So obviously that leads us into organic cottons, hemps, some of the better made bamboos, because some of those, they use deadly chemicals to make them, linens, and what your grandmother and grandfather would have worn without asking to wear it. And it was in the 1940s, after the war, that all of this really came into place. And why it occurred is the monies that were made during the Second World War by the oil cartel, the oil industry, were obscene. But they didn't want to let that go. So they created the synthetic clothing industry. They were supplying larger amounts of these petrochemicals to the pharmaceutical industry. Most of the pharmaceutical drugs that now have created the #3 killer in most of the developed world are from oil. And pesticides, fungicides, and herbicides, all of these things are from oil. And so just go to the natural fiber first, and then certainly your undergarments should be organic. And then as time goes, because not everyone is independently wealthy, you just buy organic clothing, or at least 100% linen, 100% organic cotton, etc.